In this video, I will answer a few questions about an introduction to circles. So let's dive right in. How are the semicircle and the diameter of a circle related? Okay, let's deal with these vocabulary words. If this is a circle, then first of all, the diameter is a segment that goes from one side of the circle to the other right through the center. So this is the diameter. Okay, now a semicircle is half of the circle. So the arc that goes from here to here is a semicircle. Alright, so let's go through each one of these answer choices and see which makes sense. The length of the diameter and the length of the semicircle are the same. Now that's false. Okay, this blue segment, the diameter, is not going to be as long as the semicircle. Semicircle is longer because it's curved. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So it's definitely not going to be that one. Before we move on, there's something you need to understand about the measure of a central angle and the intercepted arc. So here's the center of the circle, and so here is a central angle, just meaning an angle whose vertex is at the center. Let's say that this angle was 95 degrees. Now the intercepted arc would be this arc right here. Alright, now arcs have degree measures as well, and this would also be 95 degrees. So in general, if you're dealing with a central angle, the measure of the central angle and the intercepted arc are going to be the same. Alright, so if this angle is theta, then this is also going to be theta. Okay, so moving on, the degree measure of the diameter and the degree measure of the semicircle are the same. Well, that's going to be true. That's going to be the answer, because the degree measure of the diameter, alright, is this angle right here. That is 180 degrees. And as I just mentioned, the central angle and the intercepted arc will always be the same measure. So this is 180 degrees. The arc is also 180 degrees, the semicircle. So that is going to be the answer. So these other ones where the angle measure is twice the measure of the semicircle, or the angle measure is half the measure of the semicircle, those can't be right. Alright, so there you go. Moving on, in circle O, shown here, segment AE and FC are diameters. Okay, so they're talking about segment AE and segment FC. Alright, these are both diameters. Arc ED measures 17 degrees. Okay, so this arc right here is 17 degrees. What is the measure of arc EFC? So arc EFC goes from E through F and all the way back around to C. This is the arc measure that we are trying to find. So let's put together a few things like a puzzle. I think the easiest way to look at it would be to see that arc EFC, see how it's the majority of the circle? It's the entire circle except for this part and this part. All right, it's the entire circle except for these two portions. Now we know the degrees for both pieces. Okay, we've got the 17 degrees and we've got the 90 degrees. So it's going to be the entire circle minus these two things. So in other words, 360 degrees minus 90 degrees minus 17 degrees. So that turns out to be 253 degrees. Kabam! All right, let's go on to the next question. In circle D, which is a secant? All right, well, this is just straight vocabulary. Let's look back at our notes. Okay, a secant is a line that passes through the circle. Okay, a secant is a line that intersects the circle at two places. So keep that in mind. Okay, so as far as just glancing at the diagram, what jumps out at me is this right here. All right, that is a secant. So if that's one of the options, that's definitely going to be it. And there you see it right here, line GH. By the way, the little symbols over the top tell you what it is. So that's that's the line symbol, as opposed to if I said GH and I just went like that, that would mean segment GH, and that would not be a secant. That would be wrong. All right. So anyway, this is definitely the answer. Okay. Now, moving on. Segments AC and BD are diameters of circle O. Okay, great. Diameters. What is the measure of arc ADB? Okay, let's see. Arc ADB starts at A, passes through D, and then continues all the way around to B. So the first thing is to understand what part of the circle they're talking about. So notice that arc ADB is the long way. Okay, now I like to work this out like a little puzzle. So we have the 73 degrees right here. So these are vertical angles. So vertical angles will have the same measure. All right, so these will be equal to each other. So they are both 73. Now, if you look at these angles over here, for example, like these two, okay, this is a semicircle. This is these angles are supplementary, so they need to add up to 180. So if this is 73 degrees, then this must be 107 degrees over here, all right, because those two would add up to 180. And then these are vertical angles as well. So this is 107 degrees as well. All right, so we know all four of these angles. So if I want to know the measure of arc ADB, it's just going to be the sum of these three angles. All right, we spoke before about the fact that the measure of the central angles equals the measure of the arcs. So in other words, arc AD out here, that's 73 degrees. Arc DC, that's 170 degrees. Arc BC is 73 degrees. All right, this only works when the angles are central angles. If the angles are at the center, then the arcs and the angle measures are the same. So we'll just add all these up, and that'll be the answer. All right, so that turns out to be 253. Okay, let's move on. Which equation can be used to find the measure of arc EHG? Okay, so EHG goes from E through H and then around to G. All right, so there's the arc that we're trying to find. And first, let's start by thinking about how we would find it. So the rest of the circle is this 80 and 35. Okay, so if I wanted to find arc EHG, I could simply subtract from 360. So if I start with the entire circle, 360, and I subtract the other two arcs, that should leave EHG. So 360 minus 80 minus 35, that should give us the arc that we're looking for. So that means okay, so they have it set up slightly differently. Like, okay, this is how I would find the final answer. But let's see, one of these equations basically involves what we were just saying. Let's see. Okay, so okay, the sum, we could say that the sum of all of these angles adds up to 360. Okay, so it looks like it's going to be this one. So they're saying the measure of the angle that we're looking for, okay, plus 80 plus 35 all adds up to 360. So then what I did right here, you know, what we would actually do next is next we would subtract 80 from both sides, and we would subtract 35 from both sides. Okay, and then we'd have the final answer. Okay, but we can start by saying, oh, they all add up to 360. So that's why the second one is going to be the answer. Okay. Now, if you picked the third one, I can understand why. You notice my thought process also was take something and then subtract 80 and subtract 35. But notice that what we're starting with is the entire circle, right? We would say 360 minus 80 minus 35. We wouldn't take the arc that we're looking for and then subtract 80 and subtract 35. All right? And think about it. They're saying this is equal to 360. If we take this arc, which is less than the whole circle, and then you subtract some more from it, is that going to equal 360? Is that going to give you the whole degrees of a circle? No. All right, let's move on. Okay, this will be the last question for this video. In circle D, which is tangent to the circle? Okay, let's see if we can look back at our vocabulary again. Tangent, this is what a tangent looks like. A tangent is a line. It doesn't have to be a line, though. It could be a ray or a segment that intersects the circle at one point. It just barely touches, it just skims the edge of the circle. It intersects at one point. That's what a tangent is. Okay, so we're looking for something in this picture that intersects the circle at one point. And hopefully, now that we have reviewed the vocabulary, you can see that this is what intersects the circle at one point. So that is ray AB, which is this right here. Okay, so that is definitely going to be the answer. Okay? And just in general, just make sure you study this image and make sure you're familiar with each one of these vocabulary words. We discussed many of them in the video, but for example, we didn't mention what a chord was. All right, a segment that is contained inside the circle. All right, a segment whose endpoints are on the circle. So make sure you know this vocabulary.